지금부터 글로벌 코리아 박람회
We will now begin
연구소
the
세션을
Global Korea
시작하도록 하겠습니다.
Conference on
Welcome everyone.
the Early
안녕하세요.
Childhood
오늘
Conference.
세션의 사회를 맡게 된 육아정책연구소
Welcome everyone.
국제연구팀의
My name is
이재희입니다.
Jae Lee of the
이번
Korea
글로벌 코리아
International
박람회는
Institute of Childcare and Education. The
경제인문사회연구회가
GCK 2021
국제협력단
is co-organized by NRC and KOICA as well as Exim Bank, and there are over 200 Korean government institutions and public institutions participating in the conference to talk about abundant experience in public diplomacy and international cooperation, so that we can reflect this discussion in the history for our next generation. KISE is the unique and only childcare education and childcare institute for the nation, and we have the mission and role to achieve and overcome challenges and outlook for the sustainable childcare education. Before we start our event, I would like to go over today's agenda. We have 3 presentations prepared, which is 15 minutes in length. And after the presentation, we will have panel discussion. Through today's presentation and discussion, we hope to see an in-depth discussion on the child care policy development and cooperation post-COVID era. All the presentation and discussion will be lively broadcasted online. And before we go into the presentation, we would like to welcome President Sang-hee Park of KISE for a welcoming remark.
Good afternoon. My name is Sang-hee Park, President of KISE. I am glad that KISE is participating in the Global Korea Convention hosted by NRC for the first time with this conference. I would like to thank all participants for coming in spite your very busy schedules. The Global Korea Convention is prepared by the Korean government and 225 public institutions and provides a venue for sharing diverse international cooperation best practices and achievements. This year, under the timely theme of international development cooperation and Korea's role in the corona and climate crisis era, there will be discussions on global challenges of climate change and natural disasters and sharing of progress achieved in related international cooperation. It is an honor for KISE to be part of this very important event. I wish to thank Mr. Hae Gu-jung, Chairperson of NRC, Mr. Yoon Chul-gu, Minister of OPC, Mr. Jong Moon-che, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Hyuk Sang-son, President of KOICA, Mr. Dong Won-chu, CEO of Arirang, Mr. Sayer Kim, Chairperson of the Presidential Committee for Balanced National Development and co-chair, for making this meaningful event possible. I also thank the members of the Organizing Committee, the Executive Committee, and the Promotion Committee for all their efforts. The international community, with the UN in the lead, has adopted SDGs, which are visions for the coming 15 years leading up to 2030, and is working on their implementation. Compared to the MDGs, which were our goals for the previous 15 years, SDGs embrace more diverse themes such as society, the environment, economic growth, etc., and includes goals not only for developing countries but also for developed ones. Notably, education and care for infants and young children is included in the SDGs, providing great historic meaning. In its second ODA basic plan, Korea included contributing to the SDGs as a basic direction and has newly established CPS, or Country Partnership Strategies. However, most of Korea's ODA thus far has been focused on school-age children and adults, and programs on children before school age are very, very lacking. Casey felt that we had a responsibility for pre-primary children, not only in Korea but in developing countries, and have continuously worked on different ODA programs for high-quality care, education, and well-being since inauguration, and have seen some results. With the adoption of the new curriculum, Korea is the only country in Asia Pacific that has achieved free education and care for pre-primary children, and recently many countries in Asia Pacific are benchmarking Korea. We at KISI will do our best to contribute to the development of childcare policies for sustainable development by continuing to share our experiences, success cases, and limitations in the development of childcare policies, and by carrying out practical and specific ODA projects. We are gathered today not only to do a status check on our ODA tasks, but to think about ways to promote the healthy development and happiness of primary children in the whole world, an effort which requires global cooperation. Children, wherever they are in the world, are our children. I hope that an in-depth discussion takes place today on how to ensure that they all receive fair opportunities for high-quality education and care services, regardless of their gender, nationality, race, religion, etc. Lastly, I would like to thank today's presenters, Ms. Maki Hayashikawa, Director from UNESCO Headquarters in Paris, and Ms. Yelena Ten, Deputy Head of the Main Department, Ministry of Preschool Education, Uzbekistan, and Mr. Lee An-bin, Director General from VNIES, and also Professor Chung Woo-tak, Director of Asia Pacific Center of Education for International Understanding, Professor Kim Kyung-chul, Chairman of SCECE, and Dr. Cliff Mayers of RNEC, and Dr. Moon Moo-kyung from KISI. I want to thank all of you for attending in spite of your very busy schedules. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that welcoming remark. With that, we would now like to start our presentation. But before we go into the presentation, we will have a group photo shooting session, and then we'd like to invite all the presenters and panelists onto the stage for a group photo. Thank you.
예, 그럼 본격적으로 행사를 진행하도록.
We will now begin our session. Our first presentation will be made by Ms. Maki Hayashikawa, Director of UNESCO Paris Headquarters, and she'll be talking to us on the topic of early child care education trend and issues. Briefly, I would like to introduce our first presenter. Ms. Maki Kasuno Hayashikawa is the Director of the Division of Education 2030 at UNESCO Headquarters and has extensive experience in UNESCO, UNICEF, and JICA. And she has managed global, regional, and country-level programs regarding education, gender, and education, as well as EC and learning assessment and teacher education. Currently, she oversees UNESCO's global programs on gender and inclusive education, higher education, and education in emergencies, and leads the reform of the global SDG 4 coordination mechanism. With that, please welcome Ms. Maki with a big hand.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all from Paris. I will be sharing my screen, of course, but first of all, it's indeed a great pleasure for me to be joining you today for this Global Korea Conference on Early Childhood Care Education Policy Development Cooperation for Sustainable Development. I wish to thank very much again to Kise for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity to contribute to the discussions to follow today. Let me just share my screen first. So I hope you can see my screen without any problem. So I've been asked to share briefly the current status and trends in HCC policy developing globally, maybe to kind of help to set the scene for the discussion for today's meeting. So I have prepared some slides, and before I focus on the policy-related issues specifically, let me start by reminding ourselves that nearly half of our young children still do not have access or benefiting from pre-primary education, and this means around 175 million children are missing a critical investment opportunity and suffering deep inequalities from the start. Of course, this doesn't mean that there has been no progress. Overall, as you can see here, since 2000, we have been seeing a steady progress in gross enrollment in pre-primary education worldwide, and this is certainly very encouraging given today's world. However, this overall progress has not been equally observed, and there has been a rather big disparity across regions in our world, with like only 27% in Sub-Saharan Africa to over the way to 87% in North America and Western Europe. The world average has been 61%, but of course, this has been an overall increase since 2000 from 33%. So of course, there's nothing to despair, but I think that the regional disparity is something to be concerned about. But if we also analyze this trend by income level, the disparities are even more striking. And with available data, this is from 2017, in low-income countries, only 1 out of 5 pre-primary children were enrolled in pre-primary education, which is compared to 4 in 5 in high-income countries. And this means that we are not only failing our children, our future generation, from reaching their full potential, but we are kind of basically, from a sustainable development point of view, this indicates that we are missing one of the greatest opportunities to cultivate the world's human capital today. Now, while there is indeed a great need to further invest and scale up provisions for quality early childhood care education, it is also important to understand the policy environment that is needed to enable such expansion to reach all children. And one of such enabling environment is indeed the legal provision for pre-primary education. And this is also one of the indicators for us to be monitoring against SDG 4.2 on early childhood care education. So UNESCO conducted a study recently aimed at better understanding global and regional trends from a rights-based perspective and to fill the gap in monitoring and evaluating the impact of the adoption of legal provisions on a global scale. The study provided an overview of the normative framework in 193 countries on universalizing at least 1 year pre-primary education. The main finding was that legal frameworks in most countries were not yet adequate to implement the right to universal pre-primary education. And those countries that have adopted compulsory pre-primary education are mostly from the upper middle and high income countries, while only 46 countries worldwide have adopted both free and compulsory pre-primary education. So we know that we are pretty far from realizing a universal early childhood care and pre-primary education as a human right, according to Target 4.2, as a human right within a long-term education and development objective. Just a glimpse of the regional distribution of all these provisional legal provisions. You can see again in this pie chart that there is a pretty big regional disparities. Of course, Latin America and Caribbean being the top, followed by Europe and North America, but Asia Pacific and Africa regions are still way behind in making sure that there is a proper legal framework provision to ensure the right to pre-primary education for young children. Just to zoom in on Asia Pacific region, given the context of this conference, you can see that the number of years foreseen as free and compulsory pre-primary education policies and law also vary across countries and ranging from as low as 1 year to as high as 4 years. And this is also interesting to see here that it doesn't necessarily correspond to the income level of the countries. Now, the absence of legal provision for pre-primary education as a right and public good also impacts on the level of initial government funding earmarked or allocated to pre-primary education. So compared to other levels of education, pre-primary education here, as you can see, tend to show the lowest per student funding. So we are always fighting for investment, but of course, the legal provision does restrict us from arguing why we need to have more public spending on early childhood. And when it comes to international aid, apologies that there is no distribution here by education levels, but education overall has been stagnating for some years, and often data and proportion that goes to pre-primary education are so minimal that it's not even available to show in a bigger chart like this. Now, we should not forget that early childhood care education, pre-primary education is addressed under Target 4.2 of the Sustainable Development Goal on Education. SDG 4 on education is an ambitious goal because all the 10 targets covered under the fourth goal have direct or indirect impact on one another, or they are very interdependent. And in case of the pre-primary education workforce or teachers, Target 4.C on teachers also apply to pre-primary education. And here we can see that the trends by region on indicator 4.C.3, which is on teacher qualification. We see that pre-primary education teachers are less trained and qualified compared to primary or lower secondary education teachers. And these are also related to, these also have implications on the legal provision for pre-primary education as well. Now, we know that our current world has changed a lot. I mean, the first 5 years of EFA, SDG was steady progress, but of course, we are far from reaching our pace. But then COVID-19 hit and the pandemic had a severe impact on the education sector as well. More than 155 million preschool children were affected by school closures, and in many countries, education response to COVID-19 relatively neglected pre-primary education. So in order to understand the impact of the economic shock caused by COVID-19 pandemic on enrollment, UNESCO conducted a study again, a simulation model covering 180 countries and territories, and undertook a projection analysis for all levels of education from pre-primary, primary, lower secondary, upper secondary to tertiary education. And UNESCO estimated that about 24 million learners from pre-primary to university level were at risk of not returning to school in 2020 following the education disruption due to COVID-19. But what is most important here is that the analysis projected that pre-primary education will be the second most affected sector following the tertiary level. And tertiary level because of the high cost it incurs to get back on foot. And of course, for this pre-primary education sector, the reason behind this is very much related to socioeconomic factors, including the need to generate income, increase household and child caring responsibility, and these would not, this would actually affect the primary education population, and especially those young children would also not have access to distance education during confinement, and they were very much at risk of dropping out or not going back to pre-primary education provisions. Now, of course, even before COVID-19 hit our world, services for early childhood were woefully inadequate in most countries, and over 250 million children under 5 years of age in low and middle income countries were at risk of not attaining their full potential. And here's some quick summary of achievements over the past years and also challenges that still persist, and around 5 areas: funding and investment, policy and legal framework, access to services, coordination to face catastrophes like COVID-19 and such. And with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, in order to build forward better, in the immediate years to come, we are clear that we need global, regional, and national all government policies, programs, initiatives to expand and invest more in early childhood care and education. And this is a requirement with our immediate years to come. So to mobilize political drive and galvanize collective action, and to counter the negative trends in education and to overcome the reduction or closure of services for health, nutrition, sanitation, and child protection in all the world regions. This year, we developed the Global Partnership Strategy for Early Childhood, or GPS in short, for early childhood care education, under the leadership of this Her Royal Highness Princess Laurentienne of the Netherlands, a special envoy for ECCE to UNESCO and UNESCO together. And this GPS was also developed through very inclusive and innovative dialogue with education ministers from some selected countries and development partner agencies active in this field. Now, the GPS supports the state obligations of all national and subnational governments at all income levels, of course, and civil society organizations and regional global agencies and networks to help overcome pre-existing barriers to providing effective ECCE, ECD services, as well as to flexibly address new challenges arising from COVID-19 pandemic. And this GPS also seeks to complement, but of course not to replace, national policies that are comprehensive and well-funded. And so we are trying to bring in a more enhanced enabling environment now to expand the quality inclusive provision for early childhood. Now, within this strategy, there are 5 areas identified. One representing these are key cornerstones: access, quality, inclusion, and equity are cutting across all these 5 areas. For others, and these could be the enablers or factors for the environment. And we need to harness evidence for action and right to access to qualitative, inclusive, and qualitative early childhood services. We need to leverage data for monitoring and evaluation and for accountability. We need to strengthen policy, governance, finance, and advocacy to make access to qualitative and quality and inclusive and equitable early childhood services. And we also must galvanize coordination and cooperation to secure to access quality, inclusive, and equitable services as well. Now, the GPS is really a tool by which we can speak with one voice for children to overcome the impact of severe poverty, malnutrition, and learning deficits caused by the pandemic. And we will unite, together to reinvigorate and create partnerships for conducting and coordinating action within and across countries. Ultimately, the GPS will work to achieve the achievements of the target 4.2, and also to attain this, the vision here put together is to mobilize all nations and relevant international agencies to collaborate in attaining the targets, strengthening existing interagency and global partnership, and forge new ones as needed for coordination collaboration purposes, so that we can implement a mission-driven, costed action plan with results-oriented strategies for policy and services, and substantially increase phased investment in pre-primary education, particularly in low and middle-income countries, and hoping that we can raise from an average of 2% of education budgets that was in 2018 to up to 10% by 2030. And of course, we want to mobilize the expansion of annual international aid to pre-primary education, and hopefully this will be also raised in a substantive manner over the next remaining 9 years by 2030. So to conclude, I wish to just deliver a very happy news to the audience of this conference today. Following the invitation by the Uzbekistan Prime Minister, and following the resolution adopted just last week at the UNESCO's 41st session of the General Conference, UNESCO is very proud to be working together with the government of Uzbekistan, and I see our speaker from Uzbekistan is here with us today as well, to be convening the World Conference on Early Childhood Care Education in the fall of 2022, so next year in autumn. And this conference is expected to have ministerial sessions, regional consultations, and meetings of special committees of technical legal experts to prepare. And we expect to have, for the first time, a strong statement, a commitment coming out from member states exclusively on early childhood care education. And we consider this to be the first concrete opportunity to act together for early childhood care education, advancing the GPS and 4.2 as our mandate by 2030. So I wish to welcome and invite all stakeholders from governments and partners, all the audience here in this conference to join us in the coming month to prepare for this World Conference on ECCE, which will be the second one since the one we held in 2010, already 10 years ago, and to play a key role and work together very closely, and so that we can deliver as one to realize ECCE as a fundamental right, human right, and to give our highest priority to investing in this field and scale up quality services as a foundation for achieving positive early childhood development, family well-being, lifelong learning, and sustainable development by 2030. Thank you very much.
네, 마키 카츠노 하야시.
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation.
그두 번.
We will now move on to the second presentation, but before we do that, I have an announcement to make. Initially, we were to be joined by Director Yelena Ten of Ministry of Preschool Education, but due to her personal reasons, we now have Mr. Kim Vitaly Nikolaevich to be presenting her presentation in her behalf. Mr. Kim is head of the Education Process Quality Assurance Department under MPE, and also he is Deputy Director for Educational and Methodological Work for Innovation Center of Information and Pedagogical Technologies. We'll now hear from Uzbekistan's Director Kim. Please welcome him with a big hand.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce some achievements of the Ministry of Preschool Education of Uzbekistan. In our presentation, I'll try to explain the main achievements and goals of preschool education system of Uzbekistan. Our ministry is still very young. We are only 4 years old. But in spite of that, we are trying to do all our best to develop preschool education in Uzbekistan very fast. So let me start our presentation. Population of Uzbekistan is 34.5 million people, out of which 2.8 million are children aged 3-6. Annual birth rate is around 800,000 children. We have two types of preschools: general type preschools, 3-6 years old, and the preschools for children with special needs, 2-6 years old. Well, here you can see that for the last 4 years, the number of preschools and the enrollment rate have increased. On this slide, it's shown that if in 2017, we had only 27.7% of children enrolled in preschool education, we have 62.4% of them by now. And in 2030, after 8 or 9 years, the rate will be around 80.8%. The number of public preschools has increased from 4,961 to 6,258. The number of non-public preschools has increased from 250 to 13,058. The total number has increased from 5,211 to 19,316. If 4 years ago we had only 44.8% of 6-year-old children in preschool education, by now we have around 82% of them. By 2025, we have in our plans to have all the children of 6-year-old in preschool education. I mean 100% of them. Teacher-to-child ratio still very high, and is expected to remain high within the next few years. Maximum class size is fixed at 30 for the general type preschools. Although the number of pedagogical staff has doubled since 2017, there is still shortage of teachers. In 2017, we had 58,400 teachers in preschool education, but now the number of them is around 131,983. In our kindergartens, we have full day service with a 9, 10.5, 12, and a 24-hour groups, and a half-day groups with a meals provision and without meals. Among all the kindergartens we have, 32% of them are public preschools, and 68% of them are non-public. In non-public sector, you can see that 6% of them are private, 8% are PPP-based, and 86% are family-based organizations. At the same time, in public sector, we have 75% of all enrolled children and 25% in non-public sector. In non-public preschools, 15% of children are in private kindergartens, 24% in PPP-based, and 61% are in family-based organizations. Here you can see that if in 2017 the share of budget expenditure on preschool education was 0.69% from GDP, now this share is 1.06%. The share in state budget was 1.06%, now it's 4.86%. And in educational expenditure, the share was 13.11% in 2017, now the share is 25.5%. For the last years, we have constructed 71 newly constructed buildings for kindergartens and 1,154 reconstructed buildings. Target cost indicators have been developed in 3 areas: program for creating favorable conditions for non-public PPP-based preschools, program for enrolling 6-year-old children in preschool education, construction and the reconstruction of public preschools. On this slide, you can see from state budget, we have subsidies, capital expenditure, salaries of employees of public preschools. From local budget, we have other expenses related to the maintenance of state preschools and 46% for meals. From parental fee, we have 54% for meals. Impact of COVID-19, financial impact on ECCE sector, decrease in public expenditure on education. Households' incomes are dropping, thus making it difficult to pay for preschool services. Decrease in non-public sector's profits. Mismatch between smaller funding and growing costs. How do we plan to address such impact? First, find alternative ways to ensure growth of enrollment in preschool education. Second, support non-public sector. And third, support vulnerable families. Growing population and a high birth rate create additional barrier for achieving 100% enrollment in preschool education. Necessary to expand alternative forms of education in order to maintain growth of the sector with the lower costs. New financing schemes need to be considered and gradually introduced along with the decentralization. Good information systems should in place to collect data and exclude human factor. Integration between various systems is key. So, in this presentation, we wanted to show you all the achievements and goals of the Ministry of Preschool Education of Uzbekistan. Thank you for your attention, please. Have a nice day.
비탈리 킴
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. And we will now move on to the third presentation, which will be made by Mr. Lian Bing, Director General of Vietnam National Institute of Education Sciences. And Professor Lian Bing is Director General of Vietnam Institute of Educational Sciences and the Director of National Center for Sustainable Development of General Education Quality. He received his Master's of Education in International Policy and PhD in Mathematics at Harvard University. Before joining VNIES, he has held several positions at University of Education, Vietnam National University, including Dean of Faculty of Teacher Education, Director of Center for Educational Researches and Applications, and Principal of High School of Educational Sciences. He has published more than 70 papers in international journals, 40 books for K-12 students, and is leading a research group at Vietnam Institute of Educational Sciences on developing Vietnam Educational Strategies Framework 2021 to 2030. Let's welcome him with a big hand.
Thank you, the organizers, for giving me a chance to present today. So let me share the PowerPoint. So can you see the screen? Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my presentation, I will talk about the development cooperation for the quality improvement of early childhood education in Vietnam. And I think it's a very nice match with two previous presentations. In the first presentation by UNESCO, I mean, we have a bigger pictures of the ECEs in the last 20 years and how we can achieve the goals, the targets for the SDG in the next 10 years. And we also, I mean, learning from some experience in Uzbekistan. And now I will talk more about the context in Vietnam. So my presentation will have three parts. The first part, I talk about the equity and the quality of the ECE in Vietnam. The second part, I will quickly go through about the monitoring and the assessment for the quality of the ECE in Vietnam. And in the final part, the third part, I will discuss about the future ahead, what is the main challenge and what we should do in the future time. So if we talk about the ECE in Vietnam, we can see the same trend as other countries in not only in the region, but also in the world. We have a very strong expansion in the gross enrollment of the ECE education in Vietnam. In 2019, 16%, I mean, however, the problem is the expansion was mainly borne by the public system. 52% of the enrollment in 2009 for nursery and the kindergarten together reached to 81 in 2019. And we achieved the universal goal in 2017 for 5-year-old children. And we set out the targets for the universal access for the 4 years old in 2025 and for 3 years old in 2030. You can see from, I mean, the data is still a big way to go. The key problem is for the children under 36 months, the access for the nursery is still quite low and it will be hard to get, especially for two areas. I mean, the most disadvantaged areas and also in the urban areas when, I mean, the parents, they prefer to keep their child at home to stay with the grandparents or stay with, I mean, the housekeeper rather than, I mean, sending early to the school. And you can see, I mean, there's some finger about the universal access for the 5-year-old children enrollment and more than 95%, I mean, attending the kindergarten at some way and then attending the primary school. So in the last 10 years, I think one of the biggest achievement of Vietnamese government is to get the universal access for the 5-year-old children who have at least 1 year of preschool education before entering the school. However, there's no information on the profile of this 4.57 of 5-year-old children. There is a strong presumption that it includes the children with disability, ethnic minority, and the poorest population. So the point is we get more than 95% of the student, 5 years old children who have the access to the preschool. The key problem is we have no information on the remaining 4.57, and we make the presumption that they belong to the, most disadvantaged groups, the student with disability or the ethnic minorities, or with the most disadvantaged social and economic background. Okay, and if you looking at it more closely with the accessibilities, and we look at the gross enrollment rate, it has been increasing in the last 10 years. And we take out two numbers from the school year 2009-2010, comparing with the school year 2018-2019. We can see that the kindergarten gross enrollment rate is more than 100%. It's due to the number of the overage children enrolled at the level. And the nursery enrollment rate of the children still remain quite low. It's above only 17%. And there's no remarkable improvement of nursery enrollment rate over the 10 years. And it's the problem that I mentioned already. It is the problem with the disadvantaged area and also the urban area, where the parents are not really happy with that level of childcare, and they prefer to keep their child at home if possible. And here, when we talk about the equities, we classify the accessory for the nursery and kindergarten by country-wise, or in the northern areas, or in the mountainous area. And we can see, the clear chance there's a gap between the children in more advantaged area and compared to the disadvantaged area. And for the gender parity index of enrollment at the preschool level, we can see that there's a higher rate for the boys over the girls, across all of the level. And in the graph on the right, the orange color is for the ratio between the boys over the girls, and the blue one is for the boys over the girl for the preschool, and for the gray one, it is for the nursery level. And if you're looking at the enrollment rate for the ethnic minority children at the nursery and at the kindergartens, and we can see, the improvement over the last 10 years. It's quite an improvement in the last 10 years, and we have done extremely well for the children from 5 to 6 years old. The chance going, better and better for 3 to 4 and 4 to 5. And you know that, it is on the priorities mission for education in the next 10 years to get access to this age group. But the improvement, for the lower age group, it is still, set a lot of challenge for the ECE sectors. Okay, and now if we looking more closely for the gaps and the diversities between the different area in Vietnam, in the slide I'm showing the report has been done in 2019 when we do the assessment in different provinces in Hòa Bình, Kon Tum, Hải Phòng, Đồng Tháp, and when we divided by the city, divided by the regions, urban and rural, or by the ethics minority, the king ethics or the minorities, or in the gender gap, then you can see the distribution of the 5 years old performance that can reach by this test is quite diversity. For example, in Kon Tum, it's quite low compared to the average, or you can see the gap more than 8 points between the urban and the rural areas, or between the king and the ethnic minorities, it is more than 10 points. It's very clear there's a gap between the children from the different regions and the socio-economic background. And if we looking at more closely at the different domains, and it is a test has been done with almost 900 children from 3 to 5 years old in the same regions, and for each group it accounts for one third of this number, and we can see a similar pattern across the children of all age groups for most of the areas, except for the approach to the learning. And we have looking at, the different domain from the language, literacy, cognitive development, social emotional development, cultural knowledge, participation, health and safety, and motor development. And you can see, it is quite low. The point is quite low for some domain, especially for the language, literacy, cognitive development, and social emotional development. And it will be the thing that we need to focus for the future curriculums of the ECE after 2021. And one factor that is very important for the qualities of education is the teachers. When looking at the teachers for the ECE in Vietnam, we have classified some number that you can look at this. Please focus only on the first two columns on the upper graph. It is the share of the teacher who are not meeting the qualification standards according to the Education Law 2015 and 2019. Just to let you know that in 2019, we have the new law and we required, the higher qualification standard for the ECE teachers. And you can see, there's a jump between 10% to 30% of nursery teacher doesn't meet the requirement, or for the kindergarten, it's 45% of the teacher need to have the upgrade in the qualification. And Vietnamese government has put it on the agenda to resolve these issues in the next 5 years to ensure that all of the teacher will meet the standard for the qualification. You know that before, for the teachers at the ECE, they only need to study, vocational degree, but now they need to get at least the college degree. And below is the proportion of the ECE teachers satisfy the professional standard. It is newly developed standard in 2018 with the 15 domains, and you can see that most of the teachers, they got excellent and in the good standing, but they are still different between different regions, especially for the region 5. It is in the south areas and the mountainous area. Okay, now I want to move to the second part, is the monitoring and the assessment. For the ECE institution, they are responsible for conducting regular self-assessment and checking for the activities, and they report to the management board. The monitoring board is responsible for three key missions. First one is monitoring the activities of the preschool management board, school administration council, and the preschool units, inspecting the legal status of management and operation of the preschool, auditing the annual financial report. For the assessment, for the child assessment, we looking at the different domain, not only on the physical development or only the cognitive. We looking at also the healthcare examination, children with the malnutrition, children and the proportion of the children with the school attendance and the preschool completion to ensure for the school readiness of the child. And for the child with the special needs, they have been set in the regulation. They need to be assessed in accordance with separate education plan for individual children. But it's still a big issue in Vietnam when we face two problems for the children with the special need. One is that, we don't have the good infrastructure for the kids with the special needs. The second point is about the kind of the mindset and the perspective of the parents. Most of the parents, they are not, willing to, to admit that their kids will have the special need at the early age. So sometimes actually it limits the chance for their child to have the better education. So for the monitoring and assessment, we want to classify in the three different groups: the quality of the preschool, quality of the education for the children, and the quality for the teachers. And here's some of the policy that I want to highlight to you to know. The first one is about the quality of the preschool. We align the category for the assessing national standard preschool to ensure the quality of the preschool in 2018. Over 90% of the public preschool conduct the self-assessment in accordance with the unified standard. And we adapting the GGI tools and guiding the headmaster to conduct the self-assessment of the preschool institution. For the quality of the education for children, we adapting the East Asian Pacific Early Childhood Development Scale to the Vietnam context in order to assess the development of children in the age group from 3 to 5 years old. We piloting this assessment scale for the small sampling of 800 children, aged 3 to 5 in 4 province cities in Vietnam, and we have a plan to have a large-scale assessment before we can develop the new curriculum. And we adjust the development standards for children aged 5 after 10 years of use, preparing the assessment of children at the end of the 5 years old. And for the teachers, we issue the standard for the headmaster and the professional standard for the teachers of the ECCE institution in 2018, and over 80% of the teachers participate in the quality assessment of the ECE teachers in accordance with the professional standard in 2019 and 2020. So far, there's some shortcoming about the quality assurance and monitoring. First of all, it's only the preschool and the kindergarten and the nursery. We don't have any regulation or the assessment framework for the independent groups of children and the group of no more than children. And it is a lot of, that kind of independent group. And we also need to have, a policy for that. About 60% of the preschool conduct the external assessment, and the proportion of the national standard preschool remain quite low, only 10%, and mainly at the level 1 of the national standard. You should know that we have 2 levels of the national standard for the infrastructure standard of the school. So only 10% is quite low, and most of them is only at the level 1, and level 2 is higher. The GGI tools for the assessment has been piloted, and it has not yet been used for assessing and for the quality of the preschool in the national-wide scale. The EAP ECDS tool has been used with a small sampling, and they have not secured the representative of children throughout the countries. The assessment in accordance with this tool require a very strict techniques and much more resource need to set out for that. And the set of the standard for the development of 5-year-old children need to adjust after the 10 years of use in order to secure the relevant in this context. And finally, the ICT has not yet been adopted in monitoring the assessment process in order to secure assessment quality. Only 20% of the preschool teachers has not yet participated in the assessment. So, we need more information whether they meet the national standard. So the main challenge that we identify for the ECE in Vietnam is, first of all, is the lack of the data for the group of children, especially for the children under 36 months, and lack of the supervision and the support policy to ensure the quality education for this group. Like the preschool class for the kindergarten children, young children who migrate in the populated areas or industrial zones do not have the access to the quality and equitable early childhood education. The third issue is there's no record for children with disability going to school in support center for inclusive education or studying at home. And we lack of registration and capacity of the staff at the ECE institution that can provide this kind of the training for the children with disabilities. And the final point is the quality of the cognitive development, language and literacy, social skill in the 5-year-old children need to be improved for the school readiness, especially when we implementing the new curriculum starting from school year 2020-2021. So there will be a gap between the preschool curriculum and the general education curriculums in the future. And looking ahead, we propose the 6 points that we need to focus on. The first one is to develop a system of the data on children of the preschool age. And we need to, and also, the data on the ECE centers and the center cares and education for children under 5 years old. We need to develop a large-scale assessment of the ECE qualities, developing a monitoring and assessment framework for ECE group, especially for the independent group of children and group of no more than 7 children. The third point is support policy for inclusive education for children with disability at home and at the school, and need to focus for all 3 stakeholders: children, teachers, and also, the education centers. The fourth point is promoting the parenting education programs, pay special attention for the first 3 years of the child. The fifth point is also very important, is to develop the new ECE curriculums, and we expect that the new curriculum will start to roll out in 2023. At the moment, our institution has been in charge on some kind of the pre-assessment and developing for the content of the new curriculums. The new curriculum is expected to improve the quality of development areas to be for the kids to be ready for the school readiness. And the last point, but also very important, is to enhance the participant of non-public sectors in providing the early childhood education service for the children at all of the level and with all the different backgrounds. So that's the 6 point that we need to focus in the next 5 years for the ECE sector in Vietnam. So thank you very much for the attention, and I hope that we can get the comments and the questions from the participant. Yeah, thank you.
예, 빈 교수님 다시 한번 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you very much.
Based on the presentation by 3 presenters, we were able to understand about the current status of the early childhood education and also the growth of the early childhood education in Uzbekistan. And we were also able to cover the efforts made by Vietnam on increasing and enhancing education for early childhood in Vietnam. With that, we conclude our presentation and we'll move on to our panel discussion. We have a total of 4 panelists with us today. Our first panelist is Professor Woo Tak-jung, who has led the development of early child education in Korea. And we're joined by our president of Korea Society of Early Childhood Education, Professor Kim Jung-chul, as well as the professor of Kyunghee Humanities College, Professor Woo Tak-jung. And also we have with us the director of Asia Pacific Regional Network for Early Childhood, Cliff Marius. And we have with us from our institutes, KISE, we have with us Director Moon Moo-young, who will be joining us as panelists. We'll be setting the stage to prepare for the panel discussion session, and we'll be back shortly.
네, 토론 세션 이어서
We will now begin our panel discussion. Fortunately, we were able to manage our time well thanks to our presenters. So we have full 30 minutes for our panel discussion, and we have about 7 minutes each for our panelists. So you have about 7 minutes, and Dr. Moon will be giving a summary at the end. So with that, I would like to give the microphone to Professor Utak Jung. Thank you. Nice to meet you all. My name is Utak Jung, as introduced. We were able to hear an excellent presentation by Director Maki Hayashikawa, as well as followed by 2 great presentations from Vietnam and Uzbekistan. I was able to learn a great deal through our 3 presenters. As for me, I have worked in the UNESCO National Commission for 30 years, and for 6 years, I was the director for the Asia-Pacific Center of Education for International Understanding. And now I am currently teaching at Kyung University on global citizenship education and sustainable development goals. And based on my experience, I would like to propose 3 things. First is on global agenda, and the second proposal is around presentation regarding Uzbekistan and Vietnam. And the third proposal was also discussed by our presenter from Vietnam, but I would like to briefly talk about the citizenship education, global citizenship education, and SDG education. Basically, ECE has been deprioritized compared to primary and secondary education. One example is on Millennium Development Goal, MDGs. When you look at MDGs, EFA did include early childhood education, but now only the universal education on secondary education was included in the wordings. But let me just use my slide to explain this. And in MDG, the primary and secondary universal education was stressed, and relatively speaking, there has been some awareness that pre-primary or ECE is less important. And with this awareness in MDG and being mindful of these shortcomings in MDG, and if you look at EFA in SDG, we now have ECE, but not in MDG. Only early childhood or preschool education is included. And when we created SDG, we asked to reflect all words. So now the word is reflected in SDG 4.2. And as you know, the ECE is now included in goal number 4. And so it's 4.2, and it's highlighted in blue, as I have highlighted on my presentation. But still, globally, early childhood education, or ECE, is thought as something that is good to have. And we seem to have that kind of awareness around ECE, or early childhood education. So we need to shift awareness that ECE is a must-have education. And in order to change that mindset, we need to have researches done by our researchers and scholars. But when we create this kind of global agenda, we need to emphasize the importance of ECE. When you look at the SDG goal 4.2, the detailed target does not reflect this kind of goal. As many have spoken and made the point that it is important to make the argument on free and compulsory early childhood care and education. In order to achieve this target, we need to achieve this statement in the post-SDG statement. to state that we need to have free and compulsory early childhood care and education. In order to do this, I believe we need a robust strategy. And like Ms. Maki has mentioned, and she talked about the global strategy, and it's very similar to what I was going to propose. And first, like we are doing today, we need to build a very close collaboration with Uzbekistan and Vietnam and other countries led by KISE. And we have Mr. Meyer to represent RNEC, and we need to build an alignment with international network like RNEC. And thirdly, what we need to do as a strategy is in Asia or globally, we need to have a global conference on ECCE issue to raise awareness. In Tashkent, it seems that we are going to organize ECCE International Conference in Tashkent soon. In such venue, we need a declaration and statement that could be announced. And with that declaration and statement, we can put that as a draft resolution on executive board under UNESCO. And when we do that, starting from mid-2020, it is highly likely that we will have an open working group in UN to define UN post-SDG. So when we create the next SDGs, we want to bring attention to early childhood care and education. And in that end, we need to prepare for that starting now. So in my panel discussion, I have proposed 3-phased strategy to achieve this. Through this kind of discussion, once we have the awareness globally on ECCE, we believe such change is possible. As you can see, after 2030, we hope that ECCE can become free and compulsory globally. And Ms. Maki, if you're here with us if you're still here with us, I would like to ask whether or how you view the possibility of achieving this going forward. And also, while I was in the APCU, I visited Vietnam and Uzbekistan many times. And as you can see in the wall painting of Afrasiab painting, you can see the envoy of Goguryeo dynasty visiting Uzbekistan. And also, the descendant of Korea has traveled far to Uzbekistan to live in Uzbekistan. And also, the minister of MPE is the descendant of Korea. And Vietnam uses Chinese character, and it also shares the Confucian culture with a very diligent population with focus on education. And in the recent history, when you look at Vietnam, during the Vietnam War, Korea was in Vietnam War. So there has been this hate and love relationship with Vietnam over the years with Korea. And Vietnam is also home to a Samsung mobile phone factory, and there are many migrant women here in Korea through international marriage, as well as students from Vietnam is studying here in Korea. So when you look at the special relationship, we need to have more priority when we consider our ODA to other countries. These two countries take up a very important position in our ODA cooperation. So I believe that we need to continuously carry out ECCE-related ODE with these two countries. So that's also what I would like to propose through this venue. And last but not least, Korea is doing ODA with many different countries, and it is largely focused on primary, secondary, and vocational training. We don't necessarily have priority over ECCE area, but I believe the primary, secondary, and vocational training is already very saturated, and there's a lot of competition, and there's also a lot of duplication. But however, ECCE, I believe, is a blue ocean. So if Exim Bank and KOICA can shift its priority to ECCE, I believe that will be great. UNESCO, UNU, APSEU, and other international organizations like UNESCO are looking into new areas of education, like the global citizenship education, as well as education for sustainable development. So although there are many different education being carried out, but there is no preparations and plan for education for early childhood and care and education for sustainability. In that light, as a new ODA paradigm, I would like to propose that we need to have sustainable education for ECCE, and also developing curriculum for global citizenship and sustainability for ECCE teachers and curriculum. I think that's something that we need to have, and it would be great to have such a training and curriculum developed by Korea. And I believe this will bring us peaceful and coexisting ecosystem where different race and animals and plants live together. So thus, I would like to propose these three things. Thank you.
정우탁 교수님은 글로벌 아재
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Chung. So he pointed out that our pre-primary education is actually on the back burner, and so we have to pay more attention to that. And also, it should be included in the post-SDG goals, and so we have to pay more attention to the pre-primary programs.
클리프 메이어 박사님께서 토론해
Next, I would like to invite Mr. Cliff Mayers from RNEC.
Hello, everyone, and I'm delighted to be here today for this presentation. RNEC is a regional network for early childhood. We're registered in Singapore, where our secretariat is based. We have a board of directors, and we have a steering committee made up of ECD experts from across Asia Pacific, from academics, from development partners, and from government. We're supported by UNICEF, UNESCO, the World Bank, Save the Children, Plan International, Child Fund, World Vision, and many others. And we have a long, successful partnership with KISE and have enjoyed a very productive collaboration with the Korean government and with the Korean early childhood experts. So it's a delight to be here today. So let me continue to the next slide. This is our draft strategic framework. It's a consultative process that we're still working with our partners. The idea is that this strategy will articulate our network's wishes on how we will influence early childhood development in the Asia Pacific region over the next 5 years. So here are from that strategy house diagram before. This is our vision, is to connect our stakeholders to advance holistic and inclusive early childhood development at both country and national levels. And we've been working with VNIS, for strategic outcomes, the expanding the knowledge base, evidence-based policy advocacy, strategic partnerships, and to strengthen our own capacity as a networking organization. I'm going to speak quickly now on 5 areas or 5 activities that we're working on that reflect some of this policy engagement that we're doing. One is our webinar series. And I encourage you, if you haven't seen the webinar series on early childhood development in times of COVID, please check out our website for this. We have them all recorded. There's country presentations and sharings and discussions, both on policy and practice. And our second webinar series on the nurturing care framework during the pandemic is starting now. So please check out our website and sign up for that. The second area is our learning group, where we explore specific areas that are targeted. Our current one is on playful parenting, playful learning, and we're going to have our next publication on called Connections coming out on that shortly. The third area is our lesson learning sessions. Currently, we're organizing learning sessions in the region on climate change and on the post-pandemic support for early childhood. So those are 2 areas that we're focusing on currently. 2 more activities that I want to mention. One is our RNEC conferences. We have these annually. We did not have it last year as planned, but we will be this year. And we'll keep you posted. It'll again be on early childhood in times of crisis, including pandemics, climate change, and global warming. And the 5th area is just some of our partnerships that we do. We're working with UNICEF in South Asia on a formative assessment. We're working with UNESCO Bangkok on teacher training around social emotional learning and preschoolers. So that's just some of the activities we're doing. Now we're working on something on sharing good policy practice in the context of the pandemic. How do we strengthen our early childhood programs? How do we avoid going backwards now? So here are the 3 questions we're asking in this. What has worked well? What can we learn from some of these excellent programs? What are opportunities for cross-country learning and scaling up? So we have 8 cases that we're documenting currently. Mobile creches in India. We're looking at things in the Philippines from home-based ECCD online. One Sky is an NGO based in Hong Kong, and they're working with technology in China and Vietnam for early learning in the pandemic, and with Child Fund in Indonesia. The 4 other cases in this current documentation are in Bangladesh with BRAC, as well as Plan International on distance learning. We're looking at children with disability and COVID from Mumbai, India. And lastly, in Cambodia, we're looking at the national response on early childhood led by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports. So this is, as I say, these case reviews are in process, interviews are ongoing, and the first drafts of the cases came in last week. Now we're in the process of integrating these reports and doing a finalization of the case-specific, country-specific cases, and this report will be out in December 21. So it's an example of how, from a regional perspective, we can link policies and practice and create a platform for learning and sharing together. Okay, with that, I will say thank you. Please check out our website and become members. We're a strong and active organization, and we're always looking for new partners. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
예, 메이어 박사님. 메이어 박사님께서는 RN에게 전략.
Yes, thank you very much. So, Mr. Cliff Mayers has talked about the vision of RNEC, and he has introduced us to the 8 cases and the 5 initiatives. And so, play-based parenting and numerous topics were covered by him.
이어서 진행합니다.
We would now like to invite Professor Kyung-chul Kim for discussion. Good afternoon. My name is Kyung-chul Kim. I'm a professor with the Korean National University of Education. I'm also the president of the Korea Society for Early Childhood Education. While I was listening to the presentation in this conference, I was able to see the development on how we can achieve the goal of early child education. And the issues that we have been thinking over time has been, I believe, the same issue that has been thought after by different countries, and that somewhat gave me a relief. So it has given me a chance to look back on what we can do and what we can do better. Personally, a few years ago, I was able to look into the development of early childhood development in South Pacific, Timor. And at that time, my experience was able to give me an opportunity to think about how we can develop early childhood development here in Korea as well as globally. And with Gilin University, we have a joint program with this Chinese university to develop preschool teachers, and we were able to nurture many great kindergarten teachers through this program. International cooperation is needed because we can achieve development only when we work together with different nations, and that could solidify peace in the international community. So this kind of discussion and opportunity, I believe, is very valuable. I would like to talk about 3 directions for international cooperation based on my personal experience. In international cooperation, what we need to first think about is that since the opportunity of ECD or ECE is low, many countries tend to focus on quantitative aspect rather than qualitative aspect. Since the benefit of ECE is low, people tend to focus more on quantitative expansion. But in education, quality and quantity is something that should go hand in hand. It shouldn't be an effort to show the numbers for the numbers' sake. And we don't want these kind of effort to remain at just achieving certain numbers or certain metrics. So when it comes to ECE cooperation, we need to think about the qualitative aspect as well. In Korea, when you look at the history of ECE development, in the early days, because we focused too much on quantity, many issues were taking place, and we are still not able to solve that problems. That's why we need to focus on qualitative aspect as well as quantitative aspect. In that light, the basis of international cooperation should be based on not only the experience within a country, but also focused on the current demand in the country. When it comes to ECE, it's not just about the schools or institution. It has to go hand in hand with the family and homes. And also, providing one-size-fits-all education or educational curriculum would be somewhat risky. I talked about East Timor example, but East Timor is very family-centric, and it's a Catholic country. So they have many children, and they have this community where they all share family. They have a bigger definition of family where not just your own child, but your nephews and your nephews are also your child. And because of economic reasons, they're unable to take care of all of their children. And so there has been some negligence in taking care of their children, and sometimes child take care of younger child. So there it was important to create a safe environment for children to play in. And because there's a lack of kindergarten teachers, they have the community teachers or community kindergarten, where parents play the role of kindergarten teachers. And the regions are very mountainous, and each villages have their own unique early childhood education. So one-size-fits-all education is not appropriate for East Timor. So we have to tailor to different region and different situations. And when you look at the quality of teachers is very important, and the responsibility and obligation of teachers are very important. And in Korea, there is very high quality kindergarten teachers. And in other country, I heard that the teacher did not come to kindergarten because he or she had some kind of other engagement at home. It's something unimaginable here in Korea. So when we think about international cooperation, we have to take into consideration different situations in different countries. And when it comes to international cooperation, this will be my third point, we need to have a self-sufficient culture in each of these countries. So it's not just about number of kindergarten that is built or number of teachers that were put in place, but we also need to think about how we can nurture and develop teachers within the country so that they can become self-sufficient. One example is that KOICA, together with Korean National University of Education, is doing a joint program to nurture middle school science teachers in Cambodia. We're not just delivering scientific knowledge to these teachers, but what we're doing is we're developing science teachers so that they can come up with science curriculum that is well fit for Cambodian situation. So what we're doing is we are helping countries to nurture their own teachers so that they come up with education culture and education curriculums that is fit for their own circumstances and their own countries. So we're working toward achieving international cooperation so that they can become sufficient and so that they can help themselves. Thank you. With that, I end my presentation, my discussion. Professor Kim talked about 3 points in international cooperation. First is quality over quantity. And second, we need to consider the cultural circumstances and demand. And the third, last point is we shouldn't have one size fit all, but we need to make international cooperation to enable self-sufficiency in the country. With that, I would like to give the microphone over to Dr. Moon.
안녕하십니까. 저는 육아정책.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Moo Kyung-moon from KC, and I would like to give my comments in English.
Moo Kyung-moon from Korean Institute of Childcare and Education. Today, I would like to share some findings of my 3-year project on early childhood care and education, policy development cooperation on quality monitoring in the selected Asia Pacific countries. For today's discussion, could you share my slide, please? The PowerPoint slide 좀 올려주세요. 아까 그 통역하시는 분한테 전달드렸는데. For today's discussion, I would like to start with the 3-year project on early childhood care and education, policy development cooperation in the selected Asia Pacific countries. For the project was conducted in collaboration with the UNESCO, Bangkok, and the Asia Regional Network of Early Childhood, which is RNEC. And I would like to acknowledge contributions from the following individuals. The Maki Hayashigawa, Christy Bang from UNESCO Bangkok, and Cliff Myers and Evelyn Santiago from RNEC. And also from KISE, Dr. Jae Lee and Eunjung Park and Miss Yuna Jang. I would like to also thank officials from the Ministry of Preschool Education in Uzbekistan and Ministry of Education and Training in Vietnam and Ministry of Education heritage and arts in Fiji for their participation and inputs for the projects. I would like to share some overall outputs and outcomes of the project. Then I will share some lessons learned through this first ever KISE project on development cooperation. And I also would like to suggest some provide some suggestions for Korea's future development cooperation in the field of early childhood education and care in education. 제 슬라이드 좀 올려주세요. This is a three-year project which aims to identify needs of the selected Asia-Pacific countries, which are the Uzbekistan, Vietnam, and Fiji, on ECC policy development cooperation. And to provide the policy consulting, the first year we had a needs assessment on policy development cooperation and identified common priority needs of the three participating countries and also developed a generic model of policy consulting. In the second year, we analyzed the current status and issues of the identified priority needs, and which is quality monitoring, and provided the consulting to each country to draft their action plans. In the third year, we identified to monitor implementation processes and the outcomes of the consulting, as well as to draw some future directions for development cooperation. Unfortunately, due to unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, early childhood services in 3 countries were closed mostly last year. The implementation of the action plans became considerably limited. Although the fiscal term of the project was ended, KISE continues to provide consulting to Fiji Ministry of Education with the UNESCO Bangkok. As the common priority needs for the development cooperation, we focused on establishing and improving early childhood services, service quality assurance systems in 3 countries. Some overall outputs and the outcomes of the project include accumulation of the data, early childhood care and education, and information and the recent policy development in 3 countries. And second, identify the common needs and the priorities on development cooperation, which is the quality monitoring of early childhood services. The third, the raising awareness of the importance of strategic approaches to quality monitoring in ministry officials by sharing Korea's experiences. Development of preliminary action plans. We developed the preliminary action plans for quality monitoring and also revised the quality monitoring indicators, which is already existing indicators in the country through consultation. And also, we support teacher training, which is we call the TOT, the training of trainers on monitoring indicators, especially in Fiji, which is going on at the moment. And also established and expanded the networks of experts. So we exchanged with the MOU with the Vietnam National Institute of Educational Sciences, and also we exchanged the Uzbekistan Ministry of Preschool Education. In the project, we adopted outcome analysis framework devised by the COICA. Based on theories of changes, there are 5 components such as inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes and impacts. The outputs are mostly like action plans of 3 countries and seminar materials and revised quality indicators. Outcomes and impacts are a bit too early to address, but obviously increased awareness of government officials regarding the importance of quality monitoring and related knowledges, and enhance the monitoring ability of early childhood trainers. Now I would like to share some lessons learned from the KISE project. The first, as Professor Kyung-Chul Kim mentioned, understanding early childhood education and care in socio-cultural context is really important, especially political will really matters, and then political planning and implementation also matters. And then how much the resource available resource is levels is important, and also beliefs and values on the importance of early childhood and also children are important. Second, really need to establish a robust data system in cooperating countries. Without data, no policy, indeed. And third, really rigorous consulting and then constant technical assistance toward achieving goals of the development cooperation, such as conducting the reliable researches, sharing findings, and dissemination of the findings. Really technical assistance needs to be persistent. And fourth, the close communication with the ministry officials in cooperating countries is essential. There is no need to explain the importance of this one. And also the multi-bias relationships, the mobilizing the international organization, especially this is the counterpart is the ministry of the countries. It's not the individual organizations or the individuals. So it was really critical to mobilize the international organizations to collaborate with the ministries in these selected countries. And those are some lessons we learned. And also we needed to develop some analytic framework for early childhood. As I mentioned, we utilized the framework of the COICA, but we need to have now monitoring outcomes for early childhood, this policy consultation. Next, please. For Korea's future development cooperation on early childhood care and education policy, the following maybe needs to deserve attention. We need to continue to align the constant consultation to the national policy on ECCE, which is to Korea's national policies. And also, because usually the project is finished just a very short period of time, lasts for 1 year, at the most 3 years. So a more longer term engagement is needed. Another one is, I just mentioned, outcome evaluation especially for the field of early childhood is needed. And then there are many experts and expertise in the field of development cooperation from elementary and secondary and other sectors, but not for early childhood. So we need to train and we need to have this more expertise and experts in this field. Thank you very much. This is the picture from Uzbekistan and Vietnam and Fiji Ministry of Education and Heritage and Arts. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Moon. So she participated in this 3-year project and cooperated with Fiji, Uzbekistan, and one other nation. And so she has given us very valuable comments. So I think we heard from all discussants. Is there anyone who would like to add to the discussion?
Korean language, because I think this will be on the YouTube. So I thought I'd better just make my discussion in English so that other the international colleagues could see. 오늘 그 유네스코 본부와 또 우즈베키스탄
So we are holding this session, and I would like to thank the three presenters representing UNESCO and VNIES, and also the Ministry of Preschool Education in Uzbekistan. And I would like to thank all the discussants as well. I believed that pre-primary education, ECCE, this topic is no longer under the covers. It is now out in the open, and maybe on the back burner, but I think we need to shine the limelight on pre-primary education, or ECCE. And Professor Kim has talked about his project that happened in East Timor. And actually, many projects are ongoing in Korea as well. And I think we should do a status check on all these numerous projects before we can decide on our future direction. And thirdly, well, we have UNESCO and we OECD, and we have other international organizations, and they carry out development cooperation, and they allocate budgets for a specific area. And we have major donor agencies. So I think we should do a status check on that as well. And by doing that, I think we can come up with more projects that we should be working on, and we can work closely with these major donors. And so those are my thoughts. And Professor Chung, well, his field of expertise is actually not ECCE, but he touched upon this topic, and that this should be included as a headline in the SDGs. So yes, I would like to thank you for those comments, because that was very encouraging.
Any comment from our other panelists, please? If not, with that, we would like to conclude our session. I would like to thank everyone for joining us. Especially special thanks goes to all the listeners and participants joining us through YouTube. Thank you very much.